So about a year ago, summer 2021, quite specific, a lot of detail, but we're going deep. I witnessed a miracle. And I described it that way at the time, and in some ways I still describe it as a miracle, although the context has changed somewhat, having had the time to think about it. But you decide what you think it is. That's what this story's about, and this story starts now. I'd been given a diagnosis by the German doctors of Hüftdysplasia, or hip dysplasia, as other people without German accents or speaking the German language call it. And I was set to have surgery, but I was in a pretty bad place at the time. I was pretty low, feeling pretty down. Those are both the same things, but it's nice to use the English language to its full extent. I was feeling quite depressed, and I thought, in a moment of clarity, I don't want to do this and make this big decision and go under the knife, as they say in Germany, while I was feeling like this. So I decided I was going to do a mixture of rehabilitation, physical exercise, and psychological exercise. That's what's up there. And so I was meditating quite a lot. I'd done it for a little while, and I'd started doing it as a way to try to change my opinion of myself. And that is because I was feeling like I was going to break. You know, once I got told you can't do yoga, you can't run, you can't play football, you can't do all these things, I felt so like I was made of pot and glass, and those two things that are never together. I was a pot glass man. You know, like I would walk down the stairs and jump down the last two steps and feel like I was going to shatter into a million pieces. I felt like if I, kicked a football or a homeless person, my leg would break. I was really nervous and stressed out by it. So I used meditation as a way not only to get over that and to build myself up in my mind, but quickly I realized I could heal myself in my mind. I could create space in the hip joint, close my eyes. That's what people do. That's the technique, the meditation technique. I started imagining creating space in my hip joint, sending blood there, regenerating the cells and all that stuff. And it's really fun and interesting. There was one point, and I'm just remembering this now, where I imagined my ancestors pulling on it. like all of them coming together and pulling and creating space and sort of taking it out and cleaning it off and doing all that stuff. And I don't know why, I don't know where I came across that as an idea, and maybe that's really stupid. It is definitely stupid but brilliant, and it worked. And I often think about, I imagine my ancestors, by the way, as just me, but with a beard and without clothes. There's nobody comes before me. It just skipped like 50 generations, and they're just like total cavemen. And then I came. Anyway, I was doing that, and I was doing physical exercise, including some exercises called Cossacks. And ultimately you need ankle flexibility to do those, to open up the hips and do all sorts of strength and mobility stuff. I've not had for a very long time any mobility and flexibility in my right ankle. I can't point it and I can't flex it. It was like this. And so doing that was really difficult. Anyway, those Cossacks, Google it. There's no point explaining what they are. Cossack exercise, Google that. Anyway, I was walking along, hobbling along with my mum one day. She's my only friend in Berlin, that's true. I'll call her up. What are you doing, Mum? Oh, you're in bed. I will get up and come over here. I'm really lonely. Come and hang out. It's 11 o'clock at night. We'll put film on. And so I was hanging out with my mum, and we were talking about the good old times, of which there are some. And she sort of spoiled it. She said, "Do you remember that time you got hit by that car in London? Do you remember when you got run over when you lived there in London?" I said, "Yeah, I do. I remember that well, when my right leg and particularly my right ankle got turned into the contents of a soup can." I remember it well, but what I didn't say is I hadn't thought about it for over a decade, well over a decade. I'd not thought about it at all. And in that moment, I realized it was really uncomfortable to talk about that car accident. It was really uncomfortable. Anyway, I said bye to Mum, and I called her up about an hour later. "Do you want to come over and watch a film?" Anyway, I was getting ready for bed. I was on my own at home, and I started doing some meditation, right? I thought, I wonder what my ancestors are going to make of all this. So I was meditating, and I realised, so there's this thing that you do, certainly as a new meditator, sort of imagining yourself up on a hill looking down at a motorway, cars driving along. All those cars represent your thoughts going from, let's say, left to right or right to left, and you can acknowledge them, look at the car, imagine what that thought is, and then just let it go. And I noticed there was a black Audi down there, the same black Audi that had trashed my leg in North London that fateful night, and it was driving around up and down the motorway, getting off, coming back on, and weaving its way up the hill to me. And I realised I was thinking a lot about that night and what had happened. It was really shaken me. It had really shaken me. Mum bringing it up, it had just been so buried. And so I decided I'm going to get into it. I'm going to just think about it. And I'd always, until that point, seen myself as a victim in that story. That was the only character I possibly could have played. I was the one that got broken. I was the one that ended up in hospital. And I sort of zoomed out for the first time and looked at the scene objectively, and I realised that it was my fault. That everything had been my fault that night. It was sort of, like I opened my eyes, like in a film. It was all a dream, but it wasn't a dream. I went to bed, slept pretty well, I think. Woke up the next day, started doing my Cossacks for my hip. Did the left one, all good. Went to do the difficult right one, and I passed the normal spot where I usually stop doing it, went further down until my ass was close to the floor, and I realised my right ankle, the one that looked and felt like the inside of a soup can, I don't know why I said that, was flexible, was moving. Now, I'd been doing Cossacks just for, just a few weeks, so I didn't trust that. I was like, okay, this is weird. So I did a pistol squat. You have to Google that. It's essentially a deep squat on one leg with the other leg pointing out in front of you, balanced on one foot. Now, normally, I can do that on the left side, so I did it on the left side, all good. Went to do it on the right side, and what happens is I get halfway down and I either feel like my ankle's going to shatter, or I push past it like a man. Just no pain, no gain. Scars don't lie, no fear. I pushed past it, and normally I would fall over backwards, but this time I got all the way down, and I was at the bottom of a pistol squat. I pushed up pretty hard to get out of. When you Google it, you'll see. Try it, it's difficult. Got up, like in a film. Went back down, second time, pushed up. Went back down a third time, stayed at the bottom of the squat, sort of sat there looking up at God and the Virgin Mary weeping blood onto me. That's probably disrespectful to religious people, but my ankle was moving in a way it had not moved in probably 12 or 13 years. I got up, I sat down on the wicker basket with my legs semi-crossed because my hip was difficult still, it was painful still, and I meditated, and I thought about that night again, that night that I got hit by the car. Now, what happened that night was that I was drunk, and I was coming home from Camden with some friends, and we're on the night bus, and you know that where the night bus goes past your house and you can see your house out the window, and you can sort of smell the cheese toasty under the grill, and you're like, oh, so close, and then it goes 500 meters past and you have to walk back 20 minutes, and you're like, thinking about all that inappropriate food you're going to gobble, that food that you're going to gobble down. And that night, the bus stopped outside my house at some traffic lights, and in a drunk moment, that's all it was. It's funny. In a drunk moment, I pulled this flap, hit a button, doors opened, emergency exit, and I dove off without looking, straight into an open road on a fast lane. It's just a road, but it seemed like cars were driving fast into the path of a black Audi that battered my leg. A second earlier, I'd have been on the windshield dead, more than likely. Battered my leg, turned my ankle into wet pasta. I crawled into the doorway of Pappardell's Pizza. £3 pizzas, by the way, there. Used to be delicious. Don't know how they did it for £3. Anyway, I looked down at my leg, thought looks quite like a £3 pizza. The next day I was in hospital, and for a long time after that I told people the narrative that I'd been hit by a car, hit and run, and I cemented that narrative. Anybody who would listen, I told them until it was so strong, and then I buried it down. I buried it right down, probably all the way into my ankle, and I did that because I was ashamed. I was really ashamed, of what I'd done. And I've changed a lot since then. I've done a lot of soul searching. I've done a lot of therapy, 12 steps, self-help, all that sort of stuff. And I'm very grateful for that. I'm very grateful that I'm aware of my thoughts and my feelings enough to be able to tackle them or deal with them. And in this sense, in this case, I was able to think about that night. I was able to admit that it was my fault without fear of that being real, without fear of judging myself and being more and more ashamed. I allowed myself to make a mistake and to not judge myself. And that night, that black Audi in my mind just drove off up the motorway, and I never saw it again. And I saw that miracle afterwards with a little bit of time as my ankle being healed. That was the miracle. And only later did I realize that the miracle was I'd allowed myself to be open and to not judge myself just because I was ashamed of some behavior. And that is the story of my ankle that's now greased up like a pig at Christmas, which doesn't make sense. It's been given the old Italian tune-up. I can flex it, point it, flex it, I can do it all. And my hip, by the way, is also feeling pretty fantastic. So think of that what you will. Thanks for listening. I hope that's been inspiring. I hope it makes you go out there and get wasted and dive in front of a car. Thank you for watching. Subscribe. Batter that like button.